Beginning with version CS4, Adobe introduced a new way of doing Motion Tweens. And they took the old Motion Tween and renamed that as a Classic Tween. And we've already looked at the Classic Tween. And I said, just because of my history, I tend to still use the Classic Tween a lot. But oftentimes when a new way of doing something is introduced, it's usually assumed to be better. And that probably is the case with the Motion Tween. It is indeed much faster to do a tween, and there's a lot more options all in one setting using the motion editor. I'm going to take the oval tool, and I'm going to create a little red ball. And I'm going to make that into a movie clip. And we'll call it MC Red Ball. Now in the Classic Tween, we created two keyframes and created a tween in between them. So the tween really resided on the timeline within the frame. The new Motion Tween resides with the object. And all I'm going to do is right click on this object and choose Create Motion Tween. Now when I did that, it extended my frames on the timeline, showing me that Motion Tweens can run for 24 frames. I actually want to go a little bit longer than that. I'm going to grab this end point, that very last frame of the Motion Tween, and let's stretch it out. I'm going to do down to frame 48, so it's 2 seconds long. Now at this point, if we were to run our program, we would see nothing happen. Wherever my playhead is, I can adjust the object that is being tweened. So I've moved my playhead to the very end here. I'm going to grab my object and just move it over here to the right hand side of the stage, just off the stage. You'll notice it creates a path for me, and I can scrub the playhead and watch the object move along that path. Now as before, working with Classic Tweens and motion guides, we could take that path and arc it, and it still follows that path. Each little dot on this path represents a frame. And I can actually move my playhead to a location and grab the object and say, I want to move this down over here on this frame. And notice the path reconforms to that location. Maybe over here I want to bring it up. And over here I'm going to bring it back down a little bit. So now there is our new path. It's as easy as that to alter the path, is just moving the object in whatever frame we want. And wherever it moves, you'll notice there's a little diamond here which represents a change of status in the Motion Tween. Let me just run this, and you see it follows that path. Now one of the cool things about Motion Tweens is there is a window called the Motion Presets. I'm going to bring up here. There's a bunch of presets that we could use and apply to our object if we wanted. These are already built for us. We can also take this Motion Tween that we created and save it. I'm going to right click on my object and choose Save as Motion Preset. I'm going to call this Red Ball Tween. And when I do that, it appears in my custom folder of the motion presets. There's my Red Ball Tween. Now what's significant about that is I can take this tween and I can reuse it in other projects. So I've got another project here, and what I have is our familiar goose in the library. I'm going to minimize this for a minute. Go to the library and bring over our flying goose. Now this is a movie clip of the goose in all 5 positions, and just to demonstrate that, I'm going to put it out here on the frame or on the stage and test my movie. Now this needs to be probably for 12 frames per second, but you're going to get the point of how this works. I've moved the goose over here to the left hand side of the stage, and now if I right click on it, I can create a Motion Tween. I'm going to go to my Motion Presets, and I'm going to select the Red Ball Tween. I'm going to make sure my goose is selected, and I'm going to say Apply. And now that path is applied to my goose. Let me just test this. And you'll see the goose indeed does follow that path. Now I can alter this path if I want. So I'm going to move my playhead over to one of these, in essence, keyframes. And let's move the goose down here. And so now it's going to follow that path. I'm going to go back to my red ball, and I'm going to remove the tween. I'm going to get rid of these extra frames on my timeline. And let's move the ball up here to the top. Now I'm going to insert another motion tween here. And let's extend this again down to about 2 seconds. And at about the halfway mark, or a little before that, I'm going to bring the ball straight down, and we're going to have it bounce off the bottom of our stage. So there's our animation. On this one up here, I want to bring the ball back up. And I really want it to kind of stay straight in line. And so I'm going to come down here. Where this ball hits, I'm just going to nudge this over a little bit. So we get a little straighter path. And I want to use that squash and stretch technique of the ball bouncing. So when it comes down here, I'm going to select the ball. And now I'm going to bring up the motion editor. The motion editor is a panel that lets me work with the timeline of the tween and make a lot of different transformations to my object. So we can see the motion X and Y charted out for us on this graph. You notice the X doesn't change, but the Y sure does. That's it falling down and bouncing back up. So when it reaches the point of contact with the ground, I'm going to go to the couple frames over, and I'm going to move this ball back down into place. Now I can do that just using the X and Y coordinates. I want to bring the Y, in this case, back down, and I want to apply that squish effect. So here I'm going to do it with the transformation. I'm going to extend out the X and bring in the Y so it retains its mass. And I'm going to come back here and bring this back down to the floor. So now we can see that on this transformation it's affected that a little bit. I need to come back here. I'm going to select that one, and I'm just going to set this to 100. Set this to 100. Now as we scrub through these 3 frames, you'll see the squish effect happen there. Okay, I'm going to come back out a few frames, and I want to apply the stretch technique. So again, I'm going to change the X coordinate. We want to narrow it this time, and I want to stretch it out on the Y. And then I want to bring it back down to the bottom. So here is our hitting the floor, our squash, and our stretch. And then I have it start to come up. And as it comes up here, I want to return it to its normal size. So again, I'll go 100%, 100%. And now we can see it hit, squash, stretch, and return, and continue back up. Let's test this. Now on the timeline, if I wanted to extend this out a little bit, I could grab the end of my motion tween and I could stretch it out. And when I do that, it's going to stretch all the frames out. So now rather than 2 frames here, I have 3. And that might be exactly the effect I want. I'm going to undo that. Maybe what I want to do is add more to this motion tween where it's going to, we'll do some kind of crazy here where once it hits the return, I'm going to have it bounce out this way. So what I can do here to add more frames to the end of this motion tween is hold down my shift key, grab that last frame, and extend out. So here is where it's come up to back to the top off the stage, and then it's staying there for a while. I'm going to come out to the end here, and I'm now going to grab this and bring it off the stage. So it didn't affect any of these, in essence, what we might call keyframes. We simply added more frames and added another keyframe at the end. Just so you can see this happen, let me test it. As we look at the motion editor, you'll see there are all kinds of things we can do at the same time. Besides just the basic motion, we can also rotate our object. That'd be rotating around the pivot point on the z-axis. We can skew it as well as scale it. We can apply color effects, which would be the alpha, brightness, and tint. So if I want the ball to change color, maybe as it comes out past the off to the right side of the stage, I've got my playhead position on that last part. I can go to the color effect and say add, and I want to add a tint, and let's add a blue tint here. I'm going to bring this up, but I don't want that tint to be applied until after it's gone up to the top. So I'm going to come back to about frame 40, 48, where I was hitting the top up here, and I want to take this tint and I'm going to set it down to 0 so it remains red. Let's just see the effect of that when we test our movie. So it's red, and now it transforms from red to blue. We can also apply filters. So I might do things such as a blur or a glow, and again I can do that over time. So there's a lot of transformations that can be placed on our object during the motion tween that we have control of in one spot. This technique and this use of the Motion Tween editor is really fashioned around another Adobe product called After Effects. And After Effects is sort of like Photoshop for video. Here we're using those same kind of techniques on an animation of a movie clip object, or it could be text or some other object that can be tweened.